Tonight's theme is right place, right time. Alex Miller is a 13-year-old human from the sunny, exotic paradise of Lolo, Montana. He has 2 eyes, 2 ears, a nose, a mouth, 2 arms, and 2 legs. He is the perfect specimen of Star Wars nerddom. In his spare time, he likes to play video games and read novels. One day, in a galaxy far, far away, he will probably go to college and study something geeky. May the force be with you. Please welcome Alex Miller.
May 26th, 2017 was the start of MisCon, and MisCon is a Comic-Con, and for those of you who don't know, Comic-Con is a giant convention of nerds like myself who get together dressed in costumes and talk about costumes and other movies and comic books and all that fun stuff. The main attraction for Comic-Con in 2017 was a Delorean outfitted to look like the time machine from the film Back to the Future. We pull into the Holiday Inn where the convention was being held, and I saw the film for the first time in 4th grade and loved it immediately. So I saw the Delorean, instantly started freaking out and decided I need a lot of pictures. Lots of pictures. We headed to the Delorean. The gull-wing doors are propped open so you could sit in the Delorean and look at everything. So I sit down in the driver's side, and over my right shoulder the flux capacitor was fluxing, which was really, really cool that it did that. While I'm sitting there holding the steering wheel, taking all of this in, that I'm sitting in the DeLorean, Vern, the guy who owns the DeLorean, comes up and says, "Hey kid, push that button," and points to one of the many buttons in the dashboard. I was told to not push buttons unless I knew what they did or if I was told to do so. So I push the button and I hear Doc Brown, who was played by Chris Lloyd in the film, yell out, 1.21 gigawatts! When he discovers that's how much energy you need to run the flux capacitor. I turn to Vern and I say, "That's really cool." And I get out to get ready to look at the rest of the convention, and I hit the floor, which is the terminology we use to describe where everything is, the floor of the convention. I get changed into the Han Solo costume I had prepared for the convention, and I'm wandering around, talk to people, play a couple of old video games, play some new video games, bought some merchandise, a t-shirt. At about 5:30, we noticed that the DeLorean has left, we being my mom and my younger brother Aaron. So we decide that we're going to go get dinner at one of the many locations downtown. So we start listing off all the places we can get dinner in downtown Missoula. I decide we go to Bridge Pizza on Higgins. So we all pile into the car and go to Bridge Pizza. While we're pulling into Bridge Pizza, I see across the street in the Big Dipper parking lot 2 DeLoreans. One being the time machine I saw earlier in the day, and the other being a stock DeLorean that was not modified at all. We decide that we're going to go over and take more pictures and compare the time machine to the stock DeLorean. While we're doing this, I think to myself, which I thought was in my head but was apparently out loud, if I ask, could I go for a ride in the DeLorean? My mom says, you don't know until you ask. We get to Big Dipper, and I'm scanning the line to see who I would think would own a stock DeLorean. Because I saw Vern, the guy who owned the Back to the Future car, the modded DeLorean. So I'm scanning the line, and I see a guy with bright silver Albert Einstein-esque hair, dressed as Doc Brown, complete with yellow velvet trench coat and red button-up t-shirt from the second film. And I was like, that's him. So we sit down, start talking about the car and the movies and Comic-Con in general. And I ask Doc Brown, who's my friend Ryan, I asked him if I could go for a ride in the DeLorean, and he looks at Vern, and Vern looks at him, and then they look at me. And then Vern says, why not? So Ryan immediately stands up, walks to the stock DeLorean, which is what I like to call a backwards car, where the trunk is where the engine would be. So it's in the hood, and the engine is in the back of the car. Pulls out an orange vest and the psychedelic baseball cap from Back to the Future 2, hands them to me and says, "Put these on." I take off the Han Solo vest I was wearing earlier in the day. I'm still dressed as Han Solo. Put on the Marty McFly vest and hat. While I'm doing so, this couple comes up and says, "Can we take a picture of the car?" And Doc and I just said, "Yeah, of course." We did this for about 30 minutes, taking pictures with people who saw the movies. Eventually, we decide that we're going to go to Doc Brown's, or Ryan's, workshop in East Missoula. So we load into the DeLorean, which has no seat belts. We load into the DeLorean, close the gull wing doors, which was probably one of the most satisfying things ever. And we head off towards East Missoula. And I think my favorite part of that entire 30-minute ride from Big Dipper to East Missoula was we were at a stoplight. And I look over and I see a guy in a black Cadillac. And he glances down at the car, looks ahead, does a double take, grabs his phone and starts trying to take pictures. We get to Doc's metal workshop, where he goes in and pulls out a second stock DeLorean. So we had a total of 3 DeLoreans and 1 Subaru that my mom rode in to get to the workshop. And we start doing a mini photo shoot with these DeLoreans. We recreate one of the behind the scenes pictures where they line the DeLoreans up diagonally, and we open the doors and you could see the grill through the doors. And that was really cool. We did that for about an hour and a half or 2. Talked about the films and our favorite characters. While we're doing this, we decide we're done. And we load into the Subaru. My younger brother, Aaron, from the back seat of the Subaru, says, "When are we going to have dinner? It's about 9 o'clock. We haven't had dinner yet." It occurred to Mom and I both that we haven't had dinner yet, actually. So we stop and get some fast food on the way home. While we're doing so, I decide that I want to see one of the films when we get home. I don't care which one. I want to see one. Mom says, "I'm going to be a sane person and go to bed because it'll be late, but you can stay up and do whatever you want." I watch the first film and fall asleep on the couch. When I wake up, I wait for Mom to wake up because she slept in. So it's Saturday? Yeah. I tell her that I had the weirdest dream, that I was Marty McFly and I was sitting next to Doc Brown in the DeLorean. And she takes this all in and she says, "That actually happened." And I try and recall what happened, and I was like, "Yeah, it did." Thank you.
30 years as a psychotherapist taught Michael Peery Herrick a deep, biting respect for the healing power of story. In June, he turns 70, and in the fall, he's moving to Ireland. Please welcome Michael Peery Herrick.
May 3rd, 1997. It was a Saturday evening in Dublin. I'd been in Ireland for 3 weeks conducting a psychotherapy training. I was staying with my friend Seamus. He was away in Paris for the week, up to some sort of shenanigans, I'm sure, and I had the house to myself. There was a program coming on the telly at 8 o'clock that I wanted to watch, and I was just settling into the easy chair in the sitting room when, bang, I was propelled out of the chair and onto the floor by a sensation that I have described as getting hit between the shoulder blades with something hot and hard. Pinned there in pain, I heard a voice woven out of pure compassion. And it said, "Are you finished?" Time got a little weird right then. And I remembered immediately 8 months before, hiking in the foothills outside of Boulder, Colorado. I had screamed to the heavens something on the order of, "I'm not going to commit suicide, but God damn it, if it doesn't get any better than this, fucking kill me." A rather melodramatic outburst in the face of a souring relationship. But nonetheless, I was being held accountable. And I had a choice to make. I took a couple of deep breaths amidst the pain, and I said out loud, so no confusion could be had, "No, I'm not finished yet." I'm not sure how long I laid on the carpet. When I finally made it to the chair and to the phone, I called my friend and colleague Mary. She'd been a surgical nurse for most of her career, and by the time she got to the house, I had managed to get myself in bed. She checked me over. My pulse was normal. I wasn't sweaty. I wasn't nauseous. And as the pain subsided, we sort of convinced each other that maybe I was okay, that I probably should have had myself checked out. But first, I went to bed. Got up the next morning, finished a workshop, got on a plane, flew to London, took the tube to Wimbledon, and walked with my luggage about a mile to my friend Sorrel and Hazel's house, where I was given a cup of tea and put to bed. The next day, Sorrel and I took the tube to Trafalgar Square, where we met our colleague M and had an all-day meeting in the cafeteria of the National Gallery. Back to Wimbledon, a fitful night's sleep, a train ride to Gatwick, a plane ride to Cincinnati, another to Denver. And 8 hours after I landed, a gentleman was explaining to me in Boulder Community Hospital that I was indeed having a heart attack, and according to my blood work, I had had one 3 days prior. An hour later, he was snaking a steel cable up through my femoral artery, down into my aorta, into my right coronary artery. I was watching this on a video screen. And when he pushed that wire through the blockage there, bliss ensued. No doubt propelled by the immediate lack of pain and by the 2 tabs of morphine that I'd been given earlier. Much self-reflection ensued. Many changes happened. So, the first week in January, 4 years ago, I believe in the Catholic calendar, it's called the Feast of the Epiphany. I was standing in a park in Longmont, Colorado, at 2 in the morning, watching a light snowfall come down through the naked trees, thinking about my life, when that same question showed up. Are you finished? Now, it certainly had relevancy to my current circumstances. I'd had kind of a rugged end to 2013. My wife had come home from taking our daughter, our only child, to college. Her daughter, my stepdaughter, we'd been together for 11 years. With the news that she had been offered the job that she'd been interviewing for 2 months, a real feather in her career cap. Yay for that. The next day, I went to work. I was then the social services director at a long-term care facility. I was called to the new director's office at noontime, and let's just say I was made redundant. I was given a month's severance and thank you for your service to the organization. The next day was my wife's birthday. And we decided, what the hell, we're going to still go out to dinner to our favorite restaurant, celebrate her new job, maybe talk about what I might be doing later. It was all in all a very pleasant evening. The next day, she asked me for a divorce. It was a 1-2 punch that sort of took the wind out of me, I have to say. But I looked at her, and I knew that this decision had been made when she had been on the road, not in response to my losing the job. And I knew there was no discussion about it. So, how does a man with an advanced degree in psychology and 3 decades of clinical experience deal with such a blow? Well, I'll tell you how I did it. By November 1st, I was in a basement apartment that I'd signed a 4-month lease on, complete with hot plate and microwave. I went out and bought a pack of cigarettes, an ounce of pot, and I started going to Blackhawk, Colorado to play in the $100 limit Texas Hold'em poker game. I do not recommend playing poker when you are depressed. So, by the Feast of the Epiphany, about 5 days after our divorce papers were filed, my wife already had a new lover, and I was standing in the park thinking about my options. Was I finished? When I spoke to the heavens, to the trees, to the snow, and what I said was, I don't know if I'm finished, but I goddamn well know that I need something to say yes to. And the next day, my friend Tom called me from Butte. We were roommates over here at the U in 1969 and 70. We stayed in touch over the years. And when I told him my tale of woe, Tom, being a pragmatic sort, said to me, "Michael, I think you need to get out of town for a while." So I drove to Butte in January, 4 years ago. And while I was here, there was an article in the paper where an old priest was moving in out of his apartment and into an assisted living facility, and he was an old friend of my mother's. She was born in Butte, so was I. So Barbara suggested we go look at his apartment. And we did, and then we went over to the management company, and in the hallway was the 92-year-old man who owned the apartment building, who was also a friend of my mother's. I dated his daughter in high school. I introduced myself. He remembered me, and he said, "What are you doing in town?" And I said, "Well, I'm visiting, but I was over looking at Father Burke's place." And he said, "Are you thinking about moving back to Butte?" And I said, "Considering it." And he said, "The apartment is yours." I said, "All my stuff's in Colorado. I can't be here for 6 weeks." He said, "Fine, we'll redo it until you get here." I said, "You want a deposit?" He said, "No." So I said yes to an apartment. A few months later, I said yes to a job in a convenience store. A year later, I rewarded myself with a month in Big Sur. I said yes to love again. So, last week I gave notice, giving up my apartment at the end of the month, or at the end of April. I'm going walkabout for a while, and then I'm going to Ireland. Apparently, I'm not finished yet.
Sarah Black grew up in Helena, Montana. After high school, she moved around several times and is happy to currently reside in Missoula and live closer to family. She is fascinated by wellness, storytelling, mind-body work, art, the outdoors, social justice, and all the ways that they intersect. Please welcome Sarah Black.
Yeah, thank you. Not that tall. When I was 21 years old, I met this guy. His name was Tony. I met him in Helena, Montana, my hometown of all places, and I fell in love pretty fast. He was smart, and he was hot, and he would listen to Ani DiFranco with me, who, it sounds like you do know, but if you don't know, she's a weapons-grade feminist folk singer. And I felt like I could be with him and still be myself. So Tony, that's his name, Tony, he had this job. And because of this job, we moved around the country a lot. Every other year, sometimes every year. And somewhere in there, I think we became distant from each other, although at this point, I don't know exactly when that started. But when I was 29, his job took us to Binghamton, New York, other side of the country. And that's where I met this woman. She was really intriguing, and she knew more Ani DiFranco songs than I even did. And I started to realize that I was maybe in a little bit of trouble here. Because I had feelings still for my husband, and I was starting to have feelings for her. Her name is Lewis. She's one of those androgynous, non-binary kinds of people. And this was kind of new to me. I'd always sort of been on the outside of queer land. Sort of like if you walk down a dark street and you see a house with the lights on and you think, those guys look like they're having fun. I want to go hang out with them. Well, that's how I was, but I had always walked past. And this time I was having a hard time walking past. And there was a couple of other strange things going on with me. I was eating an entire veggie diet, not on purpose either. This was not a weight loss thing. It's just the only thing I wanted to eat. I did not want chocolate, which is very strange for me. I was sleeping 4, maybe 5 hours a night and waking up wired, which is also strange for me. People thought I looked good because I was losing weight, except my mother. She said, "You don't look healthy. Something's going on here, and you need to get your act together." And she was right. I weighed 90 pounds. So I reached out to a friend, one friend that I could think of who had been through something remotely like what I've been through. He's the only person I could think of. His name is Greg. And he was kind and compassionate and non-judgmental, and he helped me through this state of indecision that I lived in for about 6 months. And I remember at one point he said to me, "You can't do this wrong." And I said, "Are you kidding me? I can't do this right." And he said, "No, whatever you do out of love, you can't do it wrong." So when I was, at the end of this 6-month period, we finally came to a decision. And Tony and I decided to go our separate ways. He spent the holiday with a friend in Canada. It was just before Christmas. And I was in Binghamton, New York, waiting for my parents to arrive so that I could tell them, first of all, I'm getting a divorce. And second, I'm in a relationship with a woman. In one conversation. My mom is an external processor like me, so she had all the questions, and I felt like the least I could do was answer them. "So does this mean you're gay?" "No, more like bi." "Did you always know this?" "Yes." "Did Tony always know this?" "Yes." "Do you think there's a chance for you and Tony?" "Probably not." And then my dad, who is an internal processor and hadn't said much up to this point, he gave me a hug and he said, "First of all, we love you." And then we cried. And my mom said, "Why didn't I say that first?" And it was a long road to come back from that whole experience and feel whole again. For several months, maybe even a year, I couldn't listen to music or watch any TV or any movies because I had so many emotions that were so complicated that I couldn't take in anything else. That also is very atypical of me. I was seeing a therapist who gave me a note card that says, "Self-forgiveness is conceding that you could not possibly know what you know until you finally know it." It's tacked up downstairs on a corkboard. So now I'm 38. I married that woman. We have an awesome daughter. We see my parents, thank you. We see my parents at least once a month, if not more. And there are days that I would love to get into a time machine, a Delorean, perhaps, and go back and do some things different. Not everything, but a few things. But if I could do that, I would do it all the time. I would go back and fix every little mistake I ever made, and I would never move on, and I would never learn to forgive myself. So I guess you could say I was always in the right place at the right time, because I can only be where I am when I'm there. Thank you.
Heather Adams' early dance years were spent dancing professionally in Arizona and Philadelphia. After graduating the University of the Arts in Philly and training in New York City for a spell, a 6-month visit to Missoula turned into a 2-decade adventure. Jobs at a newspaper, a restaurant, an art gallery, a university, a children's theater, and a software company inspired Heather to found the Downtown Dance Collective in 2007. She still spends a considerable amount doing many other jobs, but now they are all about the arts and building a vibrant community. Please welcome Heather Adams.
I always wanted to go to Africa. As soon as I knew that it was a place, I absolutely wanted to be there. My father loved maps and would point out places on the map and say, "Go here, they speak this language, they do this kind of dance, there's this kind of rhythm, this is what the topography looks like." And we would just romanticize all of these places in the maps. Of course, we would get National Geographic every month, and then I would find these places in National Geographic, but Africa, oh man. I mean, the colors and the sounds and the rhythm, and I just could imagine what it would all be like. Fast forward to 2012. I went through a pretty painful and messy divorce. So naturally, I cut off all my hair, pierced my nose, and went to Spain. That's what you do. And luckily, I have a friend that lives in Spain. I wasn't just wandering around. I have a friend that lives in Spain. She happens to own a bar right by the beach. She has an apartment on the beach with a balcony overlooking the ocean, and you can see Africa. And we would sit on her balcony and dream about going to Africa together. And she's a wildlife biologist. I mean, that's why she owns a bar. But she really wants to study leopards. And I am in love with elephants. And we just talked about how much we wanted to go. I get home, and about a year later, I have an emergency surgery that was terrifying. A year after that, I lost my father. A year after that, I lost my mother. And somewhere in there, I lost a golden retriever. My life was turning into like a sad country song. And Africa was getting further and further away. Fast forward to last year, I get a call from my dear friend Jillian, and she says, hey, do you want to dance in the Off the Rack for the Blue Mountain Clinic fundraiser? I was like, yeah, any day that I can dance with Jillian, I'm going to do it. Blue Mountain Clinic, of course, I'm going. So somewhere during that day, she says, I'm going to Africa. I was like, what? And she's like, with my sister and with my father, and some other artists are coming from LA, and we're going to teach. And I was like, can I come? And she's like, great, of course, yes, totally, you can come. I go home that night and buy a ticket. She sends me her itinerary in the email with the airport code and everything. I just buy the ticket. I wake up in the morning, I'm like, so where am I going in Africa? It's a big place. Where did I just buy a ticket to? So I get on the Google and I look up Malawi. Okay, Malawi, awesome, great. Okay, I'm kind of doing some more research and I'm getting kind of panicked. I realize Malawi is not the Serengeti, it's not the Congo, it's not Egypt, it's not Ngorongoro Crater. There aren't wildebeest, there aren't elephants, there aren't wild, the big five is not there. They've been poached. The population is desperate. AIDS, malaria riddle this population. 80% of the time there's no electricity in Malawi. I was like, this isn't the Africa that shows up in National Geographic. This isn't the one that shows up in the Encyclopedia Britannica or all the maps that my dad showed me. What am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? Of course, talking to Jillian more, I realize how incredible this trip is actually going to be. There's 15 artists and mostly dancers, of course. And we're going and we're going to work with 44 orphan girls in this Mulanji village in Africa, and it's going to be amazing. We're going to do arts and dance and music. And we get to Africa, and as soon as I put my feet on the ground, it's literally like electric shock up my body, through my spine. My feet are vibrating. I realize I'm finally here. I'm finally here. I mean, I went to Morocco a few years before, but it didn't count. This was Malawi. This was amazing. I was so excited. We do the camp. It's unreal. I mean, these 44 girls, they were sponges. They were soaking everything up, and they were wringing themselves out every single day. They were so giving, and they were so excited to have us there. And we were so excited to be with them. Every morning, they greeted us with music and dance as we were driving down the road. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break my heart into two. And it was the most incredible experience of my entire life. I was so dirty, and I got sick, and it was terrible, and it was awful, and it was just the best. It was absolutely the best. So a few days later, we go to Mua Mission. Mua Mission is in Mua, Malawi. It's right on Lake Malawi. And there's a mission there, lorded over by Father Claude Boucher, who J.R. Tolkien would have been super proud of. This guy is like dwarf king, right? He's like this bigger guy. He's got big hair, and he like smokes 5,000 cigarettes, and there's smoke sort of always whirling around him. And he has this like concrete desk that he sits at. I mean, it's crazy. They all decide that they're going to leave the next day, and I'm like, no, I'm not leaving. This guy's amazing. I have to hang out with this guy. So I do. And Mua Mission is incredible. I mean, Father Boucher and others that help him teach the men of this village to carve the beautiful African woods, sell it, and then make their village a better place. It's absolutely an incredible place. Next morning, I'm kissing everybody goodbye, sort of tearful. Everyone's leaving. And I'm like, okay, goodbye, goodbye, goodbye. And I'm like, okay, I'm kind of hungry. So I start to walk back to my room, and I'm like, oh, darn. My food just went off with them. Shoot. I hadn't eaten really much the day before. I had some toast that morning, so I was pretty hungry. But my food just went off with them. And then I get into my room and realize I've got 2 $100 bills and a credit card, which doesn't do you any good in Mua Mission, Malawi. They don't accept American dollars. Credit cards are just like little pieces of artwork that sit in your pocket at this point, right? There's nothing you can do with them. So I'm like, okay, what do I do? I got no money, I'm kind of hungry, so I go for a walk. And I go down to this amphitheater where they have services on most days of the week. And I go onto the stage. That's where I'm comfortable. Dancing, of course, not talking. But dancing. So I get onto the stage and I sit down and I lay back and I shut my eyes. And I'm kind of calming my heart rate down a little bit. And I become aware of there's turkeys off in the distance, and they're gobbling and they're scratching and they're fighting with each other. I hear children behind me in the water playing. I hear women washing their clothes. I hear men talking as they're whittling this beautiful African wood. And I just think, I have to come back here. I absolutely have to come back here. This can't be the only time that I'm in Malawi. This has been incredible. I have to see these girls again. I have to work with them more. And then I open my eyes, I'm like, but I have to get out of Africa first. I actually have to get back to Missoula so that I can get back here a year later, because I can't stay here right now. So I get my phone. I have my phone because I've been taking pictures. I turn on the data, which is like $5,000, right, just to turn on the data. And I start to text the people that are in the van that just drove off. I'm like, what am I doing? There's no like Wi-Fi. There's no, none of that. But I check my email. There's a couple of new emails in there. The very top email was from Angie. Angie lives in South Africa. And she says, I got your name from a couple of different people. And they said, you're the person that should come and teach dance in South Africa next year. And I'm like, oh my God. Because to get to Africa, the first time I sold my Vespa, I sold everything in my garage. I mean, I was even picking up my little dog and saying like, all right, guy, how much do you weigh? I could get like $10 a pound. I mean, so I'm like, how am I gonna get back? How can I afford this? It's not a small trip. She says, we'll pay for you to come out. Right? So I get to go back to South Africa in a few months. I'll be able to go back to Malawi and do this arts and empowerment camp again with these girls, see where they've been the last year. And it's so, so exciting. So the Africa I went to see wasn't the Africa I thought I wanted, but it was the one that I ended up needing. And opening up my phone at that right time, it was a godsend. It truly was, the stars aligned. Thank you.